Welcome to the Business Trendsetter podcast, where we talk about trends and how to use them to grow your business. My name is Manny Turan.
And I'm Adam Hartung.
We are Spark Partners. Please visit our website at sparkpartners.com to learn all about how you can grow your business by understanding trends. And certainly we want to talk today about a trend, if you will, stemming from the global pandemic. And that unfortunately is the, many countries were locked down completely from foreign visitors, in or out. And I want to kind of talk about a personal experience from your side, Adam, as you just returned from a globe-trotting trip, and then kind of zero back into the local and national and even international economies. So give us a story about your recent trip, Adam.
Well, I've been going around the world trying to see many sites and visit many people for about a decade now. And one of the trends that was really big at the turn of the century, and it continued well into 2010, was this real explosion in people going to places that before seemed unreachable. We had more people trying to climb the Himalayas to get to the top anywhere on Mount Everest than ever before. You had as many people trying to do it in 1 year as you'd had in a decade at previous times. People were trying to go look at the sites in many of these historic ancient locations. And it had changed the face of tourism, because what had been very, very difficult places to see, they started paving the roads, they started putting in buses, they started installing washrooms where there used to never be such a thing. And all that was to go after this expanding tourism base, often in parts of the world that were pretty poor countries, and therefore they really enjoyed getting those tourism dollars. And we also saw the freeing up of China and some more restrictive regimes in the Asian part of the world, which allowed people to travel who hadn't been allowed to travel internationally in the past. That was the big trend until we hit the pandemic. The pandemic comes in, and then all of a sudden we see these countries lock down their countries. Malaysia locks down, Thailand locks down, Tanzania locks down, Egypt locks down. So we see these places locking in, and the tourism just comes to a halt, right? And so it stops pretty much completely. We see through the summer of 2020, so it ends by April of 2020 and doesn't resume again until October 2020, but it's very sporadic. Who's going to let you into their country? What kind of tests do you have to have? And then the vaccines came along, and they started being a combination of you have to have vaccines and testing in order to get across borders. Those kinds of things started happening. What we're seeing now is something that's quite a bit different, in that we're seeing the supply side of the equation really start to have control. Whereas in the past, it was this demand side. All these people really wanted to go see the pyramids at Giza or the Sphinx at Giza, trying to go see these kinds of sites. That was on one side, and the demand was growing, and so the supply was being created to support the demand. Now that supply is in place, there's no demand, it goes to nothing, and they're begging for the demand to come back. So you're seeing, when you go out there, just this real willingness on the part of the suppliers, everything, hotels, restaurants, vehicle operators, transportation operators, everybody's like, gee, we've got capacity. We would like to fill that capacity again. And that's what we're seeing now, is just a lot of pressure on the governments to open up borders. In the local places, you can see it in a place like Las Vegas, or you can see it in California, where they're just the suppliers, the people in business are really putting a lot of pressure on the government to say, listen, let's open this up. Let's let people do whatever they want to do. Now, I will tell you, just from my recent experience, I was just recently in Egypt and in Tanzania, and I found myself surrounded by other tourists, other travelers from around the world, including Russia, the Ukraine, India, and other countries. And what happens is you suddenly, sitting there saying, are these people vaccinated or not vaccinated? Because I can tell you that as I left the United States, the proclivity to mask wearing dropped exponentially. It was a nonlinear equation. It went from, in the United States, especially I left from San Francisco on the initial flight, everybody having a mask on, to where I was in, for example, when I was on the Red Sea in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, nobody was wearing a mask. When I got to Tanzania, almost nobody was wearing a mask. And there's a long story about the president of Tanzania and how he pretty much took a Donald Trump approach of don't wear masks, and so the people in the country never wore masks. My issue right now, though, I think for our business people, is to recognize when you have a demand side of the equation that's pulling growth versus the supply side of the equation. When you're chasing demand, that's a good business practice. You're like, okay, wow, this is a trend. More and more people want to do something, right? When you eat in restaurants, go to hotels. And so you're in a good position to pull that trend. When you have a supply side push, the problem is now what happens is you're trying to create a trend. You're trying to say, oh, look, here's this supply. We've got hotel rooms. We've got airplane seats. We've got bus seats. We've got the supply. Let's try to get everybody to get back to that old trend again. That's what we're seeing today. And don't confuse the two, because the first one is something that you invest in. The second one is you don't want to invest in it, because obviously what you're seeing is that supply exceeds demand. Supply exceeds demand. They're trying to create demand. The last thing you want to do is invest in that. And for example, I'm seeing when I go to these places, price discounting is changing the nature. I stayed at a Four Seasons hotel in Sharm el Sheikh. I would never recommend anyone go to that hotel. It was a Best Western when I got there. The place had lowered prices to a number of people from around the world, and the promise of the Four Seasons brand was not fulfilled and even remotely fulfilled. And it's really, in my estimation, it seriously damages the brand, the Four Seasons, to chase off and try to get that extra demand. And that's what I think our business people have to be aware of. What are you really trying to do out there in terms of, are you investing in trends? Are you investing for growth? Are you saying, hey, we got a whole lot of capacity. We got a supply side problem. Let's try to get a trend to happen. Let's try to bring it back by using techniques such as price reduction in order to try to fulfill it.
So let's take a magnifying glass to that particular aspect of our conversation here. So you've got this hotel in Egypt. Obviously, the demand is gone for one reason or another, the pandemic, whatever it might be, and you've got this supply. How do you recommend a business owner in that industry deal with the fact that their demand is gone so low?
Well, I think this is something we have to look at across all of the hospitality industry. Start there. You have restaurants, you have hotels. The one issue is you can say, well, hey, I've got an infrastructure. And so since I've got the infrastructure, let's sell it at whatever price takes advantage of the infrastructure. What we know, though, is that that's not actually going to create the kind of demand that's profitable. In other words, we're sitting there saying, I have no revenue. Let me discount price. Let me make these adjustments in pricing mechanisms to increase the demand. Therefore, I have the revenue. But is that a sustainable business model? Historically, never. Never is that a sustainable business model, because what's happening is, yes, you're creating enough demand to try to cover some of your fixed costs, such as the debt service on the building, for example. But unless you're able to generate a demand at a price point that covers all of your variable costs, all of your fixed costs, and provides a return for your investors, whether they be debt holders or equity holders, you're not a viable business. I mean, you got to cover all those costs in order to make it successful. And then what happens is, by not covering all the costs, you end up with something that the customer has at the end of the day that's not the original product solution that you offered, and therefore they're less satisfied. So they're like, okay, I was coming here expecting a certain sort of a solution. I got something less, but maybe the price was discounted a little bit, but then it's kind of like, but that's not what I wanted. Right? I wanted the brand promise. I wanted the product promise that you had given me before. And now by cutting back on that, I'm getting something that's, not good. It's kind of like I came to your shop to buy a new car, and you told me you had inexpensive cars, but what you gave me was a used car. And, used car at a slightly lower price is not getting a brand new car. It's something entirely different. Right. So, and that's the problem that I think we're seeing run into in this issue. And people have to start to rethink what their business model is, right? Am I in the business of selling hotel rooms? Am I in the business of selling seats in a restaurant? If you think of your business that way, you're in a doom loop. Right? You're in this loop of trying to say, I'm trying to defend and extend or save my old business. That's kind of like saying, I got to find a way to get more people to ride horses because I'm in the business of horseshoeing. And if they all keep going over to cars, then I got to get them back to riding horses again. And that's what we hear a lot of the leaders in business saying, I got to get people traveling again. I got to get people, doing what they used to do, without realizing they're not going to do that. They're not going to behave the same way. Their expectations aren't the same. We've gone through 2 years of change. We've gone through a pandemic. And now people have different expectations. and they have different views of what the solution should be. What's going to happen when I go to a restaurant? Do I want to go to a restaurant? What's going to happen when I get there? I, for example, can tell you that for years, if I went to a New York restaurant or I went say to a San Francisco restaurant, my expectation was going to have very little private space. The tables are going to be close together, it's going to be crowded. That was the expectation. Now my point of view is I'm not going to tolerate that anymore. I've been through the pandemic. I didn't enjoy it before. I had to put up with it because there was all these people wanting to eat in these restaurants that I went to. Those people drifted away. And I'm not going to go back unless I have more private personal space, unless those tables are farther apart, unless nobody can listen to my conversation, whether it's in Las Vegas or wherever I am. I'm not going to go back and have that experience. It's no longer enjoyable to me. It wasn't that enjoyable before. The restaurant, the supplier got away with it because demand was high. Demand has fallen back. It's not going to come back to those same levels, and it's not going to come back if people offer the same old solutions. So what they're going to have to do is rethink what it is they're trying to sell, which leads into, again, then also elements of automation, artificial intelligence, robotics. What can I do to make this more effective in a modern world? Right? How can I take advantage? If, for example, if I've got an ocean reef, which there's several reefs in the Red Sea at the entrance to the Gulf of Suez, for example, where I went snorkeling. Right now, the idea is I fly to this very remote place. I pay a lot for a boat. I go out. I spend, exert my energy, put up with weather conditions, et cetera, in order to go look at some fish and some coral. The question is, how many people are going to keep doing that, especially in a world in which you're putting your body and your health at risk of pandemics, influenza viruses, cold viruses, et cetera? We're a lot smarter now. So what could that facility do to say, hey, look, if what we have are these reefs, is what people experience, how could I offer that experience in an alternative way? How could I somehow help people fulfill their, could fulfill that experience with virtual reality and other artificial intelligence type tools and robotics? How could I get more out of my restaurant by using robotics or other tools like that, automation, in order to supply my customers with a good experience and not have to try to cram people, 14 inches apart from each other? We all are going to be, I would say, the hospitality industry, which has been horribly devastated, needs to realize it was on this crash course a long time ago. You already had people complaining they couldn't get reservations. You had people complaining about the restaurants, they were being overcrowded, being overly loud, the service being poor, the cost of service being very, very high. These complaints were very, very loud before the pandemic. Now the customer base is rethinking.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to what we always talk about is value and value delivery. And they're starting to blur that line again when they're just trying to discount and trying to get people through the door without dealing with the underlying issues, like being crowded, like the whole hospitality industry in general has been hit hard by the way that people work, right? Can you transfer some of your employees into more of a gig worker mentality, right? Could you sell experiences rather than just, providing a product? And so, I think that business owners need to be really, really cognizant of the value delivery interplay if they want to succeed in this next new world. So I've got some numbers here. In 2020, and the world lost about $2.4 trillion due to travel restrictions. The majority of that was in tourism. A small minority was actually in other things related to sales of, if you had a sales guy that couldn't travel internationally, but the majority is tourism. In 2021, that's 2.4 trillion as well. So between those 2 years, we're looking at almost a little over $4.5 trillion of lost revenue. And this is according to the UN World Tourism Organization. And so, we talk about businesses preparing for things. And so I kind of want to take a different approach and get your thoughts on how can a business prepare for what they don't know versus for what they do know of what's coming.
Well, again, some of these things were to be expected. We had a lot of the hospitality industry built on unsustainable pay levels. So you had people working in jobs in restaurants and hotels in which the employee could not even live at a poverty rate, right? They were paid so little money. Some of them were working 2 jobs. Some of them were actually immigrants to the United States, not often, sometimes illegal immigrants to the United States, and employers were very, very desirous to look the other way and not pay attention to whether they had a green card because they wanted these low-wage employees. What they weren't recognizing was the unsustainability of that business model. You're sitting there saying the only way I can make business selling my hamburgers, my hotel rooms, or whatever is to have people that are paid below the minimum wage, paid at a poverty rate. Now what happens is you get that external disruption that I always talk about, that punctuated equilibrium. Something comes along from the outside, something unplanned, like the old meteorite that fell from the sky and killed all the dinosaurs. And then when it comes back again, what happens is people are saying, you know what? I was killing myself working as a maid. I was killing myself working, as a bus person or whatever the job might be. Might have even been, some reception hostess or something like that at the front. And they said, I'm not going to go back to that. I'm not going to go, why would if I'm going to live in poverty, let me figure out a different way to live in poverty. Or the reality is I got to find another job because otherwise I'm going to work my whole life and I'm going to die very, very poor and I'm going to be miserable the whole time. So what happened was that the external disruption caused employees to rethink their jobs and rethink how they were compensated. And so when I hear employers saying, well, I can't get my employees to come back to work, you need to realize they're sending a message, which was that they weren't happy with their jobs, the pay they had before. So you got to start to rethink this, right? What should I do? What could I do with the job? How could I automate the job? How could I change the job? And how could I increase the pay on the job? In America, for example, we have this theory that waiters, waitresses, and a lot of people in hospitality should be paid little when they should live on tips. Interesting thought, interesting theory, but what would make a lot more sense in the post-pandemic world is for employers to say, listen, ladies and gentlemen that come here as my customers, if you're in this business, you need to realize you're being serviced by a lot of people. You have the hands that serve you at the table, but there's also a lot of other people in this environment that are servicing you. And so what happens is we're going to add on top of the base price a certain amount of money. That could be 10, 12, 14, 15%, but money is now money that comes into a coffer to be distributed to everyone. If you thought service was excellent, add something on top of that, and we will distribute that to people as well, right? So that starts to address this income inequality or this low base pay problem that exists in the hospitality industry. Now, would customers reject that? The answer is, well, they might in the short term say, I'm not used to this. But the question is, are they happy with the environment? Do they like the hotel room? Do they like the restaurant they're eating at? If they like that, then this is just an adjustment in pay. The second part is to get back into, how can I automate some of these things? How can I use machinery instead of humans so that we're not trying to force people to work at an unrealistically low pay? This isn't something new. You can go back years ago. The reason, the justification that the southern states had for continuing to maintain slavery was that if they didn't have slavery, the cost of cotton production would be so great that it would drive them out of business. So the only way they could save their business was to have slaves.
It's the wrong mentality about it.
It's a wrong approach, wrong analysis, right?
Absolutely.
And that's what we have to look at again now today is, wait a minute, is there a way to do this so that we can get the solution out there that makes the customer happy, but is a sustainable business model?
Yeah. So I went to a movie theater, believe it or not, a couple of weeks ago and was very surprised and very not surprised at the same time. I walked into this place. It was one of these dollar shows, as they call them. They're kind of they have a little bit older movies in there, and I just felt like going to the movies. So we packed up, everybody went to the movies, and it was an experience because we walked in and we were the only ones there. This is a giant 8-screen, maybe 10-screen theater, and there was a person at the front, there's a person manning the popcorn booth, and we were alone in the theater, and it was like a Friday night, and I thought, how are these people going to survive? How do they survive on? And it was very inexpensive, by the way. The tickets for all of us, for I think it was 4 of us, was like $15 total with tax, and I just couldn't believe it. And so I went in there, we enjoyed the movie, and as I left, I thought to myself, these guys aren't going to make it already. And then I hear about a friend of mine that has a demolition business. They go in and they take the inside of buildings and they clear them out. And he just did a couple of big jobs with a fairly large movie theater company. And they are decimating the inside. They're removing all the seating, and they're putting in seating that has more space between them. And so I thought to myself, are they basically just rearranging the chairs on the deck of the Titanic? And probably so. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I think that you can come up with niche solutions, but always remember that they're a niche solution. There I'm referring to the fact that could somebody take a movie theater, open it up, and put very large chairs that are very comfortable? You go in and you say, well, I know you can watch this movie at home, but come watch it at my theater because I'll give you a plush environment with a much more elaborate sound system. You'll feel the seat shake when it's supposed to be an earthquake and this kind of stuff. And the answer is, there's some demand for that. And so people will, go and take advantage. You could offer food, you could make it a dinner event, come in, we'll serve you wine. There's other things you could do. But let's remember, these are niche solutions, right?
Yeah.
I still happen to own a turntable, and I own a few hundred 33 RPM vinyl albums, right? Do I think those play superior music to what I can get off of Spotify? No, I don't. Why do I have that? Well, because it's a certain experience that I enjoy and it's something that I've had for a long time. But people will tell me, the other day I had somebody tell me that the 33 RPM vinyl record business was making a comeback, and I just laughed hysterically. Yes, there's a niche market out there. There's people like me that are ready to have a turntable and an amplifier and a couple of big speakers. But that is not the way the world is going. That is a niche market. Yes. You can play to it, try to make a little money off of it. But it's not a trend. Again, this is not a trend. And it is, supply trying to attract demand. And
I have this. I'm going to show you something, Adam. I think you've seen it before. It is, and for our listeners that are just on audio, I'm going to hold up a Sony Sports Walkman that I bought with my own money for almost $200 back when I was 15.
Yeah.
Now, the reason this is cool is because it's water resistant. I could actually be hiking in the rain and it would not die. And it also had a radio built in. So I talk about this. I actually I found it the other day, and I use this as an example. If you were to activate all of the salespeople in the entire world with a magic button, that they would be robots to go sell something, and you were to have them sell Sony Sports Walkman, you would not get any sales worth really talking about. And the reason why is this is no longer something that people want to buy. So how many businesses out there are selling something that people don't want to buy, and they're blaming their salespeople? They're blaming everybody except themselves for making the decision to not go in a new direction. And I think that's what the movie theaters are doing. I think that's what a lot of these tourist places are doing. They're trying to sell something that nobody wants to buy.
Right. Will people go out to eat? Yes. Will people stay in hotel rooms? Yes. But it's not going to be the way it was before. And I think the suppliers, the people in the industry, have to start really getting attuned to the customers and what the customers want and providing them with that experience that they need at a price point that they're willing to pay. Some of the experiences we had in the past, the price will have to go up. 5-star dining has always been expensive, but it may be that 3-star dining is going to have to be more expensive. If you want fast casual food, then that's going to be approached in a different way as well. One of the things that is probably a trend now is a return to a little bit more of at-home food preparation. But we don't do it the way we used to do it in the past, where we all learned how to cook something from our parents or from a cooking show, and then we had to go to the grocery store and buy all the components. Think about it. Today, if you said, hey, this is the Wolfgang Puck, just to pick a name out of the air, this is the Wolfgang Puck home subscription service, and you signed up, and once a week, they send all the ingredients with just enough ingredients for 4 people. Here's the menu. Here's the list of instructions on how to prepare this meal. Then people say, oh, great. I've been at home. I bought some stuff. I'm doing a little bit more cooking now. I'm not going to go out and try to be Julia Childs, again, to borrow a name from a long time back. But what I could do, could I make a pretty decent meal at home? Yes. And, one of the advantages of these kinds of things is I didn't have to go to the grocery store and buy the products. A lot of times, think about the grocery store experience. I, at one point, was a family of 5. I'm now a family of 2. So now when I go to the grocery store, universally everything is packaged larger than I want it to be. If I want some chicken, I got to get enough chicken for 4 people. There's 2 of us, right? And so with just 2 people, I've got this stuff I want to throw away. But with these services, a lot of times I can sign up for 2, and they'll send me once a week a box. It's got just the right amount of food in it, right? I'm not throwing food away. And then if they build on top of that, little things like, hey, here, we can help you get diversity in your diet, or we can get more health in your diet. different ethnic foods, etc. Then what happens? I start saying, hey, if I subscribe to a couple of these, it simplifies my life, makes it easier, and I can get some of those things I wanted from going out to eat, which was, an easy experience.
Yes.
Something that I didn't have to go buy the food and do a lot of prep work. It's already cut up for me and stuff like that. It's just trying to get people to sit down and realize, hey, if what is it that people want from you, and what do they want today, and how can you give them what they want in a format that's going to help them to be more willing to buy from you and to pay you enough to make it a sustainable business.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the reasons why I initially reached out to you, Adam, many years ago before we started working together is because I really enjoy, and I almost kind of nurture and really look at unconventional wisdom. It's like the world's going one way, and very few people really stop to ask why. And so we talk about lots of unconventional wisdom here at Spark Partners. I had a recent listener to our podcast reach out and said he really got a lot of value from our podcast and really loved it. Couldn't wait to listen to it. And I'd like to share with you a story about unconventional wisdom as it pertains to a little bit of what we're talking about. It came from a book by a gentleman named Robert Cialdini. It's called Influence. And here's a story. There's a story of this jewelry store that was trying to get rid of some turquoise jewelry, kind of mid-grade jewelry. And it was in their shop for a long time. And they're like, we don't need this anymore. And can we just get rid of it? I mean, they kept on trying to get rid of it. No one would buy it. So the store manager was leaving for the weekend, wrote a note for the assistant manager that said, I want you to discount all that jewelry by half, divided by 2. And he left for the weekend. He came back on Monday. It was all gone, sold. And he basically said, wow, we sold it. We must have, because we discounted it by 50%, somebody picked it up. And the answer was the opposite. He actually wrote down in his messy handwriting, and the person read to double the price. Double the price is what he did. And somebody bought it because there was a perceived value there that wasn't there before. They cleaned out the whole collection. So what I'm saying by this little short story is that you've got to look at unconventional wisdom. You've got to get out of that box and think, and not think the same way that got you to your success, but look at new approaches, look at new ways of thinking. And this is exactly about our course. We talk about constantly is our Think Innovation course, which is a masterclass that helps you to understand trends, understand how to align your business to those emerging trends, and really build an organization that's agile and not necessarily locked in. And so I want to have you, Adam, talk about our new course that we're releasing here next week called Unlock Growth. We filmed this about a month and a half ago. So Adam, talk about that course and really what it can have, what kind of impact it can have to our business owners that take the course.
Well, about 20 years ago, actually, I was when I got started thinking about how did we get businesses to grow. One of the things that really attracted my attention was that often business leaders could see the need for change, but they wouldn't take advantage of that. In other words, they would see here comes a new technology like a mobile phone or any other new technology, the internet, and they would see it. They could see it happening, and they could often see it how it was applied in somebody else's business, but they seemed unable to deal with it in their own business. They wouldn't move on that technology or that new opportunity, new customer base. They didn't move on it. And it's really fascinated me. And so I set about doing some casework to try to understand why people who were smart people, they could see the world was changing, yet they seemed unable to adapt. And what we learned was that systematically, business leaders lock in their business model. In the search for best practices, in the search for more productivity, in the search for excellence against what they've done historically, they will behaviorally and structurally lock in the way the business is done. And then once they lock in, the organization becomes very difficult to change for a raft of very good reasons. People have a job, they only see what comes to them and what goes out. They don't see the full extent of the process or what they're trying to get done. And so these lock-ins were something we were able to categorize and start to get very specific about how you lock in the existing business model. And then we recognized that when you see the need to do something different, you learn you have to explode some of these lock-ins. You have to blow them up so that they don't become the impenetrable barrier. They don't become the hurdle you can't get over. So you have to learn to identify them and then blow them up. So I think in the new course, what's going to be exciting for people is they can say, Adam, I get it. I know the world is changing. I know we had a pandemic. I know that I've got to behave differently. But even though I know it and I see it, for some reason I can't seem to act on it, they're going to find this new course is going to help them understand that, because we break it down, we name the lock-ins, we give people the opportunity to really discern where they are, why they exist, and then to go in and say, look, let's attack that lock-in. Let's knock that barrier down, and then we can begin to proceed.
Absolutely. I think a lot of these things that lock us in are just like a disease. Unless you know what it is, you really can't treat it. Yeah. People don't recognize it because it comes in, it's like a wolf in sheep's clothing, right? It comes in the form of best practices. This is our brand new amazing ERP or MRP system that's going to make everything smooth. We're going to cut down costs. Look at this big machine we just bought, this big CNC machine. Look at this building we just bought. These are all things that have the propensity to actually lock us in and prevent us from going in this new direction. I mean, a movie theater is a great example. You have all this stuff that you can't just change on a dime and go in a new direction. And yeah, sometimes it's nostalgic, right? We don't want to change because, damn it, I love driving movie theaters, right? But what does that really mean? If nobody else does, are you really going to just keep this thing open because you want to? You got to really think about what your customers want.
And so, again, the course addresses these very structural issues and how you can attack them, but also the cultural issues. I think if you went back in time 75 years ago, we didn't think about businesses as having cultures, but we certainly do now. And in fact, a lot of effort was made in the 70s, 80s, and 90s around people trying to create what they called cohesive cultures in their organization. You even heard people say that the most important thing is I hire somebody for my culture, rather than hiring them to be able to do a good job. And that has now created enormous cultural barriers in our organization. Once again, we've now identified that down into 6 categories of these cultural barriers, and then how you can identify them and explode them so that you can get beyond that really tightly woven culture that keeps you from change. It keeps you from moving forward and doing the thing you need to do. So there's structural elements and there's cultural elements, and then the last one are the cost elements. And the course goes over all of those in a way that helps you to get very prescriptive, recognize it, diagnose it, as you said, diagnose what's wrong, and then be prescriptive about going against what I have to change and identifying which pieces you're going to change first that'll have the most impact so that you can unleash your organization to become adaptive and deal with the world as it is today rather than the world when you created your business model.
Very well said, Adam. Very well said. Now invite our listeners and viewers to go to our website, sparkpartners.com, or send me or Adam an email directly at manny@sparkpartners.com or adam@sparkpartners.com. Let us know if you're interested in being on our email list, and you'll be the first to know about this new course that's going to be released in the next week or so. We're excited to share with you some of very foundational, very non-conventional, unconventional wisdom that will take your business to that next level. So with that, I will be signing off on your final note, Adam. Always good to see you, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.